Hi, welcome to Built in the Bush. My name's Tanya Atkinson. I'm an executive coach and growth and transition facilitator. And one of the absolute privileges that I get in my job is I get to hear the personal stories of how people got to be where they are today and what made them successful. And how sometimes the things that went wrong are really the things that went right for us and set us up to be where we are today. The whole point of the podcast is to share those ups and downs, to share their personal stories, but also to hopefully give you the inspiration and the motivation to realise that you can follow your dreams and your purpose. There are way too many different jobs in this world and way too many different people for us to be doing a job that we don't enjoy most of the time. So without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to Built in the Bush. Today we're talking to Glen Young, General Manager of PBR Australia. Welcome, Glen. Thanks for making the time for joining us.
No worries, Tanya. Thanks for having me.
So to start off, I'll let you introduce yourself and what your current role is and what you do. I guess firstly, I came to know Glen through one of my succession clients. So you're the son-in-law of the clients that engaged me, and then through that I got to hear a little bit of Glen's story, and it absolutely fits the bill of Built in the Bush. Following a path, although he had a dream very early on that he was set on, but still something that's a bit off the beaten track and different from the usual. So, Glen, tell us your story.
Okay. It's a hard one to start, but I guess...
How did you get started?
Well, I was pretty much...
sorry, hold on. I've got to go back a step. I forgot. Cut. Take one. Where were you built?
Where was I built? I was built in Queensland, North Queensland.
Yep.
So born and bred there.
Fine-tuned?
Fine-tuned in Townsville and Ingham at Abergarie Boarding School.
Yep.
After that. And then
debuted.
Really based in Townsville ever since. But, I spent a little bit of time in the US and Canada and places like that, Hawaii. So been a bit of a journey.
Yep. And that's where you consider your sort of career or pivotal part of it starting while you're overseas. Is that right?
It changed the way I was thinking. Just with the people that I got to hang out with, the people that I got to meet. It was, I always sort of grew up about positive thinking, and I've always been sort of studying psychology and all that sort of stuff. And I was just very lucky, very fortunate to get in and around some guys in the US that just took it to another level. And it was sort of just something that I've been pursuing ever since.
Yep. Yeah, nice. So tell us your story. How did you come to be doing what you are now?
Oh, look, I think it's, I know things have changed these days, but back when I was a young kid, we didn't have much TV. It was always outside on the street. And I think every Sunday was, the Disney Channel that we got to watch on TV. And I grew up watching John Wayne. I just thought, well, I want to be a cowboy, and, wanted to be like John Wayne and Steve McQueen back in those days. And, it sort of started the passion of me, because my family wasn't really involved in the scene that I'm in now, but I sort of took a liking to it.
Yep.
My stepdad was a jockey, so I spent a lot of time around the racetrack when I was younger. I can remember being, 5 years of age, and that's probably a pivotal moment for me, because that's when I really fell in love with John Wayne. I started working in the stables. I used to work for a guy named Manny Smith at Dommett Street in Wallaroo, opposite the racecourse, and I'd go there on a Saturday morning at 5 o'clock, and I'd clean stables, and I'd get $1 and a box of oranges off his tree.
And this is at what age?
It was about 5.5, 6, yeah.
Wow, yep.
But, back in those days it was different. I mean, we had nothing, so we had to do things to keep us entertained. And, I'd been around horses and that for a little while, growing up around them at that time. And Manny used to sit me down on the tin, and he would, this was probably about 9 o'clock in the morning on Saturday morning, and he would say, right, do you want to keep this dollar or do you want to wager it? And then we'd go through the horses that he had starting, and we would sort of work out whether I was going to wager that dollar or keep it. And most times I wagered it. And, and it was good. And, that $1 would turn into $5 or $6. And it had me a little spot under my mattress that I used to stash all those dollar bills.
So you're telling us you came out in front?
A lot of the times, yeah. Yeah, it was good. I mean, the racing industry was always good to me, because when I was growing up, we used to live right opposite the race course. So, as soon as I was old enough, so I think I was about 14, 15, I started cleaning the stables over there in the grandstands on the Saturday, and then, going over there on the Sunday and trying to find all the loose change that everyone dropped and lost.
Yep.
And, it was just, yeah, one of those opportunities that sort of put me around a different bunch of people. And I think that's one of the things about me in life is I've sort of surrounded myself by a variety of different people. And, so back in those days, it sort of started there. I can remember being just a pest of a kid to try and get to rodeos. Like my family would never go, but they'd have family and friends that would go, so I'd always tag along.
So when did it change from races to rodeo, or it was always rodeo initially?
Combination of both. Yep. Yeah, it was always a combination of both. And there was a guy, Les Rudd, and I mean his son, young Les, I think still does the racehorse transport around the country and everything like that. But Les was a bit of an idol to me when I was young because he was the only John Wayne that was local.
Yep.
He rodeoed and his family was in rodeo and stuff. So I'd always sort of go and spend a bit of time with him, and so it sort of sparked, and then one connection led to another, and it was a real weird upbringing, but it was one of those things that I never used to let an opportunity go by. So like if someone said, "Do you want to come and go do this?" Yeah, I'd go do it, whether I liked it or not. And then I think I got to about high school level, and again I was working at Woolworths, and then every Saturday after Woolworths closed, after packing bags and doing fruit and veg, a guy by the name of Keith Poole, who used to run Bartlett Park Rodeo Grounds, we'd go out there and practice for the Saturday and Sunday as kids on cars. It was just a real good upbringing for kids. It kept us out of mischief, definitely kept us tired.
Yeah.
But at the same token, I've always worked and I've always associated work with that sport, I guess, to some level. I work to do the sport, I guess, at the end of the day.
Yeah, yep, makes sense. So then how did you come to going overseas with it?
Okay, so that was so I finished grade 12. My mum, I can remember sitting down with her and she's like, okay, you've got to think about your future, because I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So practically got on the dole.
So was the dream still there deep down, or it was still, yes, I can do this?
Yeah, it was definitely there, but I just didn't know where to go or what to do, with it all. And, so I sort of, when I finished school, she said, we'll give you 6 months to, go do what you want to do, and you either go to college or get a trade or whatever it may be. And long story short, me and my mate, we got on the dole and we went fishing for a couple of months. Well, that didn't sort of fly well with my mum, and my stepdad for that matter. So pretty much had to make a decision on what to do. So I wrote a letter to a college in the United States, and I had a friend going to the college. Brad Scott was going there at the same time. And anyway, picked up a scholarship to go to university over there and do some studying and ride bulls for the college.
Yeah, right.
So I did that for 2.5, 3 years, then moved up to Canada for a while. But, while I was there, I went and rodeoed in Hawaii and went all around the US and stuff and made a lot of good friends. And for me, it was all about networking. Those connections I'd made, I still have today. I can, I always have a conversation with people. You always have people that you haven't seen for 20 years, but when you do see them, you pick it up.
Pick up where you left.
Yeah, right where you left off, and that's it. The friendships that I made over there, and but at the same token, it allows me to do business globally, because if I don't know anyone in America or Guatemala or Brazil, I know someone there that I can reach out to. Yeah, and get the job done.
Yep, absolutely. So then, what brought you back to Australia? How did that come about?
So when I went over there, I sort of was after my mum. My stepdad had passed away, and I went over there, and then I'd come back because she was sort of struggling at the time, and just being a single parent. But at the same token, for me, it was sort of, I missed Australia. I love America, don't get me wrong, but it was when I come home and experience what I'd grown up doing, it just wasn't the same. I mean, I loved getting in the creek and going fishing and stuff like that. Everything was just at the doorstep. Well, I went to Montana and I didn't see no ocean the whole time I was in America for 2.5 years. So I was coming from the coast and going inland was sort of a tough gig. But, I did it because I wanted to learn about the cowboy way. I guess if I thought, well, if I'm going to do this rodeo and everything like that, you've got to understand a little bit of history about what goes in it. I mean, I wasn't from that background. So, I went over there and threw myself at, ranch owners. Like there was one Dave Dutton. It's nothing to do with Yellowstone, but he was in Montana. He was one of the original guys that sort of picked me up and gave me work, while I was going to college over there. And so I used to go there, and then I used to pack mule supplies out to a guy named Glen Swanks. And, he was an ex-cowboy, but he's an old cowboy, but had a lot of good old stories. And so I used to sit there and listen to those stories. And, while you were pack muling out there, you were really riding across country that Indians had ridden, back in the day. So you'd find arrowheads. So it was a real history sort of learning experience for me. And, but at the same token, I went there to learn and learn about horsemanship. I learned about sheep. I learned about cattle. And I sort of made the most of those opportunities while I was with Dave and every other ranch that I went and stayed on. I guess, the big highlight for me was the Bar S Ranch in Canada with a good friend of mine, Chris Chataway, and his family. Yep. They took me in one summer, and they sort of took raising cattle to another level. They were right into the beef booster program back in those days with the bull breeding. Mm-hmm. They were all about very quiet cattle, and they had a very productive ranch and a beautiful ranch, to boot. So it was good to go spend the summer there and base that for where I rodeoed. But at the same token, during the week, we played being cowboys and did the cowboy way where we were roping calves and branding. And that's the thing I used to look forward to this summertime was the brandings over there, because not only was it good and hard work, but they made it fun. It was a big family social gathering. The neighbours would come over.
So the Yellowstone depiction of it is accurate then? Or have you not?
In most cases, yeah. I mean, it is it's sort of hard because every place that we went and did a branding was different. That's what made it so enjoyable. It's so like when I went and did that in Montana, they did it a little bit different than the way they did it in Canada. When I did it in Hawaii, well, that was more like Australia. And it's and it was sort of but again, it was just a community coming together and help each other out. And I think that's what keeps those keeps the bush alive is the support from your neighbours and friends and the people in those communities.
Absolutely. Yeah. So then how did you come back to, so you're missing Australia?
Missing Australia, come back to Australia, didn't really know what I was going to do. I mean, I'd never really had a job at that stage. Like when I say I had jobs, like I was a kid, I was cleaning stables, I was riding track work, I was, because the inspiration for me when I was young, I really thought I was going to want to be a jockey, but I knew I was going to be too big. So I loved that whole industry through that period. And I loved riding track work and getting up in the early mornings and it was, again, just being around them old fellas. I remember on the Saturdays. It was sort of like, when you, back in those days, I used to have the old purple safari suit that I used to, be a 7-year-old getting over to the race course like a mad punter and sitting up there with all the old guys with their hats on and the durries hanging out their mouth. And, I'd have to slip them $2 behind the scenes for them to go put a bet on me.
Put a bet on, yeah.
For me and stuff like that. And, and it was, I just from a very young age really gravitated towards those real wise guys, and when I say wise guys, they're just people with common sense. They weren't very wealthy or anything like that, but they had lived life. Yeah. And, and I really
rich in life experience.
And that's it. And then I think that's what sort of guided me was just go do stuff, If you don't like it, you don't have to do it again. If you like it, you keep on. But I think it sort of made me keep embedding that, I knew I loved this sport and I loved this career, but there was no real jobs in it. So I had to create that job. Yeah. And so, from the time I come back, I hooked up with a company, Philip Morris at the time, with the cigarettes. I was sponsored by them as an athlete, but at the same token, they gave me a sales role and gave me a 4-wheel drive and a sat phone and sent me up the Gulf, which suited me just fine.
I was about to say you would have loved that.
So it was good. It was going up there and just, I got to work with a lot of kids up in those communities in Hopevale and in and around there. And, so it was a feel-good job for me too. Yep. You're still getting the job done for them, but at the same token, it was, better.
You felt good about what you were doing and contributing.
Yeah. Well, because we took the negative of the cigarettes, we knew everyone was smoking back in those days. And so what we just did, I just turned it around in those communities and we just donated X amount of cents per sale to, a fund that would buy sports equipment or, like I think it was in Hopevale, we put together a rodeo arena for them. Yeah. In the day. So it was sort of, so I was leaving some sort of legacy behind. And I think that's, very important with anything that you do, I guess, at the end of the day, is to make sure that, it's can't always be self-centered. It can't always be about you. I mean, if you're doing stuff, it's got to sort of benefit others. And I think that's, how you get it back tenfold.
Yep. Leave things better than where they were when you started.
Yeah. I mean, it's our legacy, I guess, at the end of the day. I mean, I could be greedy and just go in and be one of those, a very scrupulous businessman. That's all about me. But at the end of the day, you don't, don't build loyalty, you don't build the friendships and everything when you're doing that sort of stuff. And I found that, if you build trust in people, they will support you and they will follow you, and they'll offer you honest feedback, when you need it as well. It's not about just being followed. It's about taking on board what other people are thinking as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you still go from that to actually creating PBR as it is now in Australia?
Okay, so we sort of transitioned. I hooked up with, it was actually, my mum was up at the General Hospital and she was dying of cancer. So she was sort of in her final weeks with it all.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Anyway, she used to love coming to bull ride. So I sort of got together with Craig Melville and it was another prominent Townsville sort of figure, and I said, well, let's do this bull ride. So we did one at the Seaview Hotel on the volleyball court in the beer garden.
Oh, wow.
And my mum was able to sit out on the balcony and we made sure we had a big sound system and loud and the lights and everything like that. And it was a great night. It packed it out and she got to hear it and see it. But
awesome.
Monday morning I had a front page of the paper that I was banned and never to come back because it sort of created a bit too much disturbance. But it was just the people in and around that community. It was a great fun night, and we probably didn't do our due diligence on the people that lived close by.
Isn't all publicity good publicity?
It does, yes, it is. Absolutely. So that's sort of where it began, where I sort of got the bug, I can do this.
Yeah.
And then it sort of, I was in the Northern Territory and come across Troy Dan, who was just starting up Outback Adventures back in those days. I was good friends with Troy Dunn, and then we sort of created DYD. We all had the same passion. Dan had the TV connections, Dunny had the bull riding, and I sort of had the business sort of background and the know how to do the events. So we teamed up and we started DYD Extreme Sports, and that started producing the first sort of major bull riding events in the country. That sort of lasted a couple of years. Troy, went on in his own direction, and we made money, but it was right at the same time as the GST coming in, and we decided to put an event on the same weekend that it was coming in. And anyway, it didn't work. I mean, the year before we had money in boxes and everything like that worked extremely well. The following year when no one showed up because it was just one of those bad timings and a lesson learned on about scheduling dates. We'd done a lot of money, and it took the next couple of years to get back on our feet, and the sport took a number of different directions. We went under another organisation umbrella for a not-for-profit, and we tried that. That didn't work, and at the end of that, dealing with shonky business people that took us for a ride and took our money, we had to sort of, the only way for the sport to survive was to get the PBR on board and, start sanctioning events over here, and that's what Troy Dunn did, and he went over there. He had a lot of influence in the PBR and still does, and he made that happen, and then we got that going, and that's where we started building it from there. So it's sort of like trying to build an industry. There's we create regular paychecks for people. I think it was about 116 million we've put into the industry since we started those days. So, and that's a rough calculation. Could be more, it could be a little bit less, but it's very close to it. And that's sort of not only created an industry with the sport, but the events that we used to take to town used to create economic growth for them. And then that's what we're sort of big on now, is try and create events that actually, because we know our audiences will travel. So, it is important about creating economic impact. That's to get the community on side. I mean, if they're making money, they'll support you, and things will work. But if you're a promoter coming into town and you're taking all the money out of town and nothing stays local, well, that's where it gets very hard to do events on a tour in the country.
And so so you've been operating under PBR for how long now?
Since 2006.
Yep. And how many different locations? Because I know this has grown fairly exponentially.
So we went through a big rise when we went into COVID, prior to COVID coming about. I mean, we had a mobile stadium that we designed and because the biggest problem with us was finding venues to go to. So we designed a venue that we could take anywhere to a flat field and do it. And that was probably one of the bigger accomplishments that I feel I've had. But it just coming at a time where it worked, but then COVID hit, logistic costs went through the roof, and it sort of pushed it out the door. So it doesn't make sense to sort of tour that big stadium these days. But we've now been working with a guy from France, and we've designed a new portable stadium that will sort of take about half the amount of trucks to deliver and probably about 70% less labour force to build and everything like that.
So PBR's getting sustainable as well.
Well, we
not
got
just giving back to the communities, but making sure that we're improving our practices.
Exactly, and I think it's but a lot of towns we go to don't have venues, so they do miss out. But they're very financial towns, and they will support events. But it's just they miss out because they don't have a facility,
the venue to hold it. Yeah.
And when I say a facility, it's got to be suitable for basketball, tennis. It's got to, if it's an outdoor thing, and that's one thing I learnt when I did Hewenden. We sort of went out there, and the community wanted to have this bull riding on there, and I'm like, there's nowhere really to do it. And they said, I'll come to the racetrack. And then they had a vision. They had a turkey's nest over out in the paddock, and they said, no, we're going to move that over here and build this big mound around, and this is going to be the arena. And we had Erg on there. They put the power on, and I thought, geez, and they did it. And then all of a sudden we had this facility in town to go do events.
Yeah, right.
With it all. And, and it was about, back in those days, it wasn't, we would just get paid to go in and produce, but the community would keep the profit of it all. And, so that would go back into building skate parks or whatever they had to spend the money on it. I remember in Capella, one year they made enough money to put air conditioners in the school room, so that was
that's a
big
very
tick
cool
for us.
story. Yeah,
and it is, and it's sort of
the kids will remember you forever.
Well, that generation probably did, but I don't think anyone else.
No, not afterwards.
But it was it was just little things. You just get these little feel good moments, and that keeps inspiring you to go again and trying to come up with something new. And we never quit on it. I mean, it's just even now we try to do things that give back to the country. We know from the heartland, we know where we come from, this sport. And, so it is certain, like every now and again, and more regularly, we try to do events in locations that don't normally would get it.
Get them,
And realistically, it's just about giving back to the community, and they might get it for 1 year and we'll move it around to another town the next year and stuff like that. And right now it's Armidale. We're sort of focusing on to try and get an event established in that market and give the community something regular every year to look forward to.
Yep. And so how many locations now are you?
So 25 locations this year. It varied. It varies over the years and stuff, but 25 is sort of our cap. I mean, it's enough to keep us busy. I mean, we only have a small team. I lost 3/4 of my staff when COVID hit. We're probably only back to about a third of that now, but doing the same amount of work. And I think that's like everyone's business out there, whether you're a property owner or a cafe owner or anything like that. I mean, it's hard to find people these days and good people. So you find that you do things a bit smarter. And I think a lot of businesses realised that they were too top heavy, when COVID hit. And now they've sort of streamlined their businesses and streamlined processes and procedures. And, they're getting more productive and more profitability.
Yep. Working smarter, not harder.
Exactly, yeah.
So throughout that journey that you've told us, there are a few things that you've touched on that went wrong. What are some things that come to mind, something that was perhaps your most successful failure? What's something that at the time felt like it was the worst thing in the world, but then ultimately it redirected you to something even bigger and better?
Look, I've had many failures. I mean, the whole start of my career, and this was failures.
As we all have, my favourite saying is that the only difference between a successful and unsuccessful person is how many times they get back up after the failure.
Exactly, and you've got to learn from the failure.
Yep.
And that's one thing. I mean, because I went into an industry that I really had nothing. I mean, I had a bit of marketing skills from the Philip Morris days and Sky TV when I worked with those guys. I sort of knew a little bit about getting corporate sponsors on board, but when I started this, I'd go into a meeting and I'd say PBR, and they'd go, "What?" And like you'd have to explain it to them, and I'd have to have these videos, and if they didn't have a VHS there, you'd have to show them pictures. And
some of the people listening to this are going to say, "VHS, what's that?"
And it's and even that was new back in those days, and it's but it was really tough. It was pushing a rock uphill, but every day. I was determined to get people interested in it, and now because we've got so much TV content and the social media and everything else that you get out there, and we're getting good attendances, you can go to meetings now and everyone has either heard of it or seen it and knows what it is. So it does make it a little bit easier, but that rock is still getting pushed up that hill. It never stops. You know, some days it feels like you're pushing and it moves for you, but 99% of the days I get out of bed, I'm slogging that rock as far up that hill as I can get it and just trying to get another foot every day, trying to get another foot. And hopefully we'll get to that point where it does go down the other side and it's nice and easy. And it is getting to that. I mean, it just takes persistence and determination and consistency, you know, and it's just, you just can't quit. I mean, those failures that we talk about, you know, you wanted to know the worst one. Well, it was probably being introduced to a businessman that I didn't do research on.
Yeah.
You
You're
know,
not the first person there, and you won't be the last, unfortunately.
Yeah, but you know, it cost us, and it nearly brought the sport down. It brought a lot of years of hard work down, and that's what I mean. If it wasn't for the PBR jumping in and you know, expanding into Australia, we wouldn't be in this position where we are now.
Yeah, right.
So we're
but
just
at the same time, if you hadn't come across that businessman and things had gone badly, perhaps it wouldn't have pushed you to go to PBR or for them to finally come on board?
I think it was always a plan. It was always our wish to have, you know, I know Dunny and myself, you know, we used to daily talk about it, morning, afternoon, night. You know, it was just about creating pathways, making it easier for Aussies to, you know, get onto that world scene because, you know, even him back in his days, he was the pioneer of it. I mean, you know, they had to give up their life here, uproot their families, move to the US and, you know, reestablish and you know, it's not an easy game. And but now, you know, after what, you know, guys like Troy and Brendan Clark and all those guys have contributed and sacrificed, we now get it a bit easier for our guys. You know, our guys can qualify into the, you know, the world system from just competing in Australia. And they're riding for money that is, you know, a decent salary. You know, like our top guy for the last couple of years has won 180 grand from doing 20 odd events, you know, and it's...
And that would have been unheard of in rodeo in Australia. How long ago?
Yeah, it's never been seen. I mean, you know, you can look at the rodeos and they might make, you know, 50,000, your top competitor, you know, but they're traveling to a lot more events.
Yeah.
And, you know, and they're doing a lot more sacrificing. But, you know, young Boston Leather's only 18 last year, and to walk away with that much money, I don't know. If I was 18, I wouldn't know. As
an 18-year-old.
Yeah. But it's a head start for them. And that's what I'm trying to get into these kids' head is it's, you know, you've got to ride bulls for a purpose. Yeah, it's fun and it is a sport, but it's now a business.
Yep.
And, you know, we've got bull riders winning over $1 million a year, you know. So if you want to sacrifice a certain part of your life, you know, a certain time of your life and dedicate and commit, there's an opportunity there if you want it, you know. And I mean, we get a handful of those guys every year that are pursuing it, but it is getting better, you know. And I think, you know, kids are making a good living out of it now. You know, it's definitely worth the commitment and effort to put into it. Yep. It's no longer a hobby; it is a business. And like I said, you know, they get two opportunities. They get to be a part of a teams format, which is new to our sport, and you know, it's taken, you know, viewership to another level because it's encountered a lot more different fans. But it's also doubled the career earnings of these guys, so they get 2 tours a year to compete in and earning double the amount of money than what they were previously. And, you know, but at the same token, that's why I say to these kids, you know, if you're riding and you have a purpose, don't go and party it up. If you win, go buy some cows or go buy some bricks and mortar or invest in something because...
Something that you're going to have to show for when you can't ride anymore and the money's not there.
Well, there was a guy in Hawaii and he sat me down and he said to me, and he was a teacher and he was a very wise man. And he said to me, he goes, look, you got to do 20 years work in 10 years. You know, while you're young, go hard because to have that later 10 years off in life, you know, it's what you put in now is going to make that happen. And I thought about that for ages and I thought, you know, well, what's that mean? You know, does it waking up and showing up for work and from 9 and just working to 5 and switching off? No, it's not that at all. I mean, it's, you know, it's about having a dig and if you've got spare time, put some effort in and you know, put it towards something that's constructive. You know, and then that's going to benefit you because at the end of the day, we can sit around and wish and hope and that we're all going to get a golden egg and everything like that, but it never happens. You've got to work for it. I mean, that's, you know, it's just Aussie nature. You know, there's nothing comes easy. And it doesn't matter to these, you know, like these kids now is like they've, you know, like if they get that bricks and mortar, it's when you come to the end of your career, when you sit on the balcony in your rocking chair, and you're sort of looking out over everything and you look back on your career, you know, if you've won that kind of money and you're sitting in that bricks and mortar, you should feel happy with yourself. Yep. You know, but if you're sitting in that chair and I wish I did this and I wish I did that back then, well, yeah, I don't ever want to be in that position. I just want to be able to
You
sit
and
there and relax at the end of it and be happy.
Yep. I've never met anyone that I've never met anyone that regretted having a go. It's normally once you get older, it's looking back and it's things you didn't have a go at, isn't it? That tend to be the regrets.
And for me, that's daily. I mean, like every day I wake up, if I don't finish the day, feeling accomplished, feeling that I've accomplished
that
something.
you've achieved.
I mean, there's days where you just spin tires and you don't get anywhere, but you're working through it. But I mean, every day you get up is just about going hard and trying to get something done. And, what you did yesterday doesn't really matter about today, and tomorrow is still yet to come. So it's what you do today is what makes tomorrow even better.
Absolutely. Role models? Do you have any role models or influences then or now?
Yeah, I do. And I think, obviously family, have always been a great influence to me. I mean, I love the way that I was brought up. I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way. I do appreciate the time and effort that, both my father, my stepfather and my mother, gave me and give me this opportunity. So, obviously they've been a big role model in my life. But, if I had to pick individuals, there was one that we call Cowboy Donnie Elford.
Yep.
He was with the AEG group and, he was one of the ones that believed in the early days in me and the product that we were working on. And he gave us the opportunity to go into the Superdome. That was like after the Olympics back in the day. And we went into that big venue and we hadn't done nothing that big ever. It was sort of, and I had no money. That was the other thing. So it was sort of like they backed me in, they underwrote me, and we lost money. I mean, we filled the place, but we, that was back when we were trying to sell tickets for $10, so it still didn't make enough to cover it. But at the end of the day, they backed me and underwrote that event, and we did it again, and we've done it again, and we've been continuing doing in those events in those venues for near on 20 years. So, that's one thing I'd take about Don. He's not only gave me that opportunity, but he's been a great advisor. If I need to get in the door to someone, he knows somebody. Yep. And, and that's why I sort of see myself as that is just about making the connections and, connecting the dots but keeping relationships. And then probably another one would be an Irish guy by the name of John Leahy. He's a TV producer. And he's just been there since day one. And he's been the one that's been patting me on the back when you do good and, throwing ideas and throwing different, just making me think differently. Yeah, about decisions I've got to make. Those two guys, and they've been genuine friends. It's like I can call them up 2 a.m. in the morning or whatever. I mean, when we do get together, we love a beer. But both of them are very seasoned beer drinkers, and they always put me under the table.
You don't try and keep up? Or you still do?
I do try and keep up, but the Irishman, he's about 7'7",
and he's an Irishman.
300 pound, and he's an Irishman.
The only nationality that can drink more than us,
and loves drinking schooners. So it's one of those things, and talks a lot. So you don't really realise how much you're drinking with him because
the
conversation's always that good. And then you're ready for another one. You're ready for another one. And then 4 or 5 later, you're flat out getting off the ground, and he's wanting to go out and
he's still sober.
Yeah, but I think we've shared both those guys. We've shared some ups and downs together, personally, and but they've always been there, for me, and I just really appreciate those friendships.
Yep. So that was going to be one of my next questions. What trees did you knowingly or unknowingly plant years ago? And that might be some of the relationships with those people that have ended up being lifelong mentors, supports, advocates.
I think that sort of takes, so there was a point, like I went over the US and I didn't know I was networking, and when I started with Philip Morris and Sky Channel, I really didn't know I was networking, but I just loved meeting people and whether it was, celebrity trainers and jockeys or whatever, but the environment I always found myself in with them was just a one-on-one, and they weren't superstars, but we got to talk and got to know each other. So for me, it was always about building those friendships. But then it was sort of later on, I left Sky TV and I jumped in my car and I went to visit a friend in Bowen and he wasn't home. And anyway, I sort of kept driving. Anyway, it was about a year later, I turned back up. I just sort of was going on an adventure, ended up over in Western Australia, ended up in the Kimberleys working with the Aboriginal kids up there around Fitzroy Crossing and stuff like that. But I really knuckled down and made sure every town I went to, I made acquaintances, because then I started realising what I wanted to do with these tours and stuff like that. And I thought, I may need to come back to this town. I like this town. It's good fishing. I want to be back in this town. And I mean, that's practically how the tour really got going, is I like putting it on in locations where there was good fishing.
Good fishing.
So I had a good reason to go there and stuff like that. But I mean, that's changed since then, but we still go fishing a lot. But, and I've got a team that works
as any real good Burdekin boy does.
Yeah, exactly. And but it was just I guess those trees was every market I went to, I made connections. And I kept those friendships, and I know that everyone has those friendships that, like we said, 20 years ago, but you pick up the phone and you call them today, and it was like a day after 20 years ago when you met them. You don't. Life moves on, and you can catch up within an hour and get caught up on each other's life and still be best friends, and I think that's,
and then not talk for another 10 years.
Exactly. But you can call on them, and they know that if you ask them to get you connected with somebody or a favour, I mean, it's about building that trust with them, and and it's that relationship you have with them. But I think for me, it's just travelling when I was young and making the most of those places I went and the people I met.
Yep.
Sort of the trees I planted, because I still count on them today, whether it's in Guatemala, Brazil, Mexico, Middle East, of China. You can practically pick up the phone into any of those markets and do business, so to speak.
And what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong too, is it's not networking for the sake of networking. So I probably just want to clarify that, because networking can take on a different meaning, but yours is networking where it's actually building real relationships.
Because one thing I found is people move. So it doesn't matter if I went through the day of I research and find out who the marketing manager was of this company, and you try to build that friendship, but you're not alike. You're not the same, so there's never really going to be that friendship there, because you're sort of two different types of people. But I did pursue that avenue because I thought that was networking. But now what I find is if you find the friendship first, it doesn't matter where that person goes, whether they're with Coca-Cola or Pepsi or Bundaberg rum or whatever. I mean, if you've got their trust, you're going to get business out of them whichever way they go.
Lead with authenticity.
Exactly.
It's what Oprah says. Have you been watching Oprah?
No, I haven't actually watched Oprah.
I'll send through that episode. But very valid point. That's why I just wanted to clarify that. So leads us to the next questions. So over the grid, few potentially bumpy questions. Nice, short, sharp answers though. Don't overthink it. What gets you out of bed in the morning?
Challenges.
Ever experienced burnout?
I feel I have, but I feel I didn't know it, just because I was ignorant and arrogant and pursued. I think it was a couple of Christmases ago, because I used to have events like right up to New Year's Eve, so we never really stopped. And then a couple of years ago we stopped that, and I found myself sitting around at a time where I'm normally busy, and it gave me too much time to think. And I knew my body was tired, and I knew I was burnt out, and the weather was absolutely horrendous. I think that's when we got the cyclone, and we had no power and everything like that for a while. And one thing led to another, and it did start making me think some negative thoughts. And I was just like, so I went, and my father-in-law had an old green Fiat tractor, no roof on it, roars like all hell, and there's no padding on the seat. So I went and tortured myself for 2 days and sat on that in the hot sun and slashed in the paddock. And
good hard labour.
It was uncomfortable, but I tell you what, it definitely took my mind away from, where it was going, and put me back on track. And, you look back at the paddock, even though it was so hard, but you look back at the paddock and, you're seeing the job that you'd done. But I was blessed right after that, because then the rain come. So it was sort of like, torturing myself, but it was at the right time. And that made me feel even better. And, but I do feel like I've had burnout. I think a lot of the time I get to a stage, because I do a lot of early, I'm sort of
conferences and calls
24/7, and it's sort of, you never get to switch off as much. But like this last
because
2
you're
months,
dealing internationally so much as well. That's why
exactly,
you're particularly 24/7.
doing that, but it's also just the challenges that we have here. But I think it's and it's not only work challenges; it's family and everything else that goes on. It's a combination of stuff that goes with it. But I find myself getting tired now, and then what I'll try and do is I'll just try and take 1 to 2 days where I just really make sure I get good sleep and eat right, and just let my body reset and go again. But I think as the older I've got, I've sort of gotten wiser to when that's actually going on with me. Because when I was younger, I just try and, like I said, I was arrogant,
push through it,
ignorant. Just I can handle this and keep going. And end of the day, your body can't. As you get older, your body can't handle it. And it comes down to and I don't think a lot of people actually own up to it. But before I had it, I know that a couple of my close friends went through it. And so it was sort of good talking to them. And I guess that's what made me aware of it so quickly. And I thought, well, shit, I'm not going to get into this state. I'm going to get busy again and keep the mind active and try and keep the positive thoughts flowing.
Yep. And definitely makes a difference when you can talk to other people that have gone through it. I'm glad that you're able to do that, because people certainly aren't talking about it. 9 out of 10 of the people I coach have experienced or experiencing burnout, and we don't talk openly enough about it.
Yeah, and I don't know, and it's not bad. I mean, there's nothing bad about it. And, and like the 2 guys that I, went through it with are tough men.
Yeah.
They are probably the 2 of the hardest men I know, working and, even to this day and well known, but at the same token, they, it was sort of they let it go too far before they did talk about it. But no, and they all agree. It was good to get it off their chest and talk about it and have someone to talk to. And that's what friends are for, especially it's you got to look out for each other. And if you notice something going on, just pull them aside and have a yarn.
Have a yarn, yep. Good point that you make, though. It is actually mostly the toughest, most successful people from the outside that have experienced burnout. And I think that's part of it, and research is showing it too, is that drive to succeed and to always be able to get things done. But at some point your body says, hang on, you got to start looking after me. I mean, we'd never ever take even our bombing car out without putting decent fuel in it, and yet we live our lives over and over, day in, day out, expecting to get 100% and not putting good fuel into our own bodies or giving it rest.
And I think, like, I've got a Brazilian kid living with me at the moment, and even though the language barrier is still, it's been nearly 8 months that he's been with us, and we've been teaching him English, and he's been trying to teach us Portuguese and stuff like that. But it's the same thing. Like, I watch him. He comes from a village in outside of Sao Paulo. Comes from nothing. The village actually put the money together for him to come to Australia.
Yeah.
He hounded me for like 4 years to get here. And, and that was sort of through COVID and that. And I said, right, come on over. And he's probably been the best addition to our family that I've ever come across, because he's come from a lifestyle way harder than what I've ever experienced or know. But he's so appreciative of anything and everything he gets. And he's so routine, every morning, 4:45, 15-minute cold shower. So I've got no worry about electricity bill because he only has a cold shower. Then from 5 to 5:30, he prays. 5:30 to 6, he meditates. 6 to 7, he trains. Comes in, I give him some jats and cheese crackers in his coffee.
That's breakfast.
He does breakfast, so he's cheap to fuel. Goes, works all day. He's out. He's got to be out, and the animals, like I've just, my cows, my calves, everything like that, the dogs, the horses, have just got this aura about him that everything just loves him, It sort of pisses me off sometimes because this is my farm. He gets all the attention, but in saying that, he's been a great inspiration, because like he does, he works hard. He has a very 7-day discipline, and he does that all in reverse of a night time too. So he does that training for an hour, meditating, praying. And
so he's already got the self-care and the work down pat. He's miles ahead of all of us.
Yeah, but the first 2 months he noticed with me, he's like, hey, Mr. Glenn, water, you don't drink water. And I was like, and I don't. I mean, I probably would drink a little bottle of water once a week.
Oh, Glenn.
Caffeine-wise, but then he explained it to me, and I started drinking water, and he brought this tea in from Brazil for me, which makes water taste even better.
Yeah.
But he's like, yeah, it's like water. You wash the outside to wash all the toxins away. Well, you got to wash the inside with it as well to clean yourself out. And I think, since I've been drinking a lot more water, and I find that is it's one thing, but it's and whether it's mentally or it's actually what my body needs, I don't know. But
I'm going to guess that it probably did if you were only drinking.
And probably both, I guess, yeah. Both mentally and physically.
Yeah.
But it's it's just a side comment that he made, and it did make me think about, are you looking after yourself? You've got your work-life balance, and there's sort of the same time that happened. Now, the company that I work for, they've been really hammering home on work-life balance and, getting that there, because if you're too involved in work, you're never going to be as productive as you are.
Yep.
If you're worrying about your outside life as well. So, last few years for me has really been trying to balance family, work, and farm life. And
so, do you have a self? Sorry.
No, I'd just say all three of them are important. For me being happy.
Yep. Do you have a self-care routine? Then.
I probably do. I think I'm very ritual. If somebody wanted to sit and just study me, I do a lot of the same stuff day in, day out. I try and mix it up on weekends. It is, for me, is like if I'm finding myself really stressed, I try and torture myself. And that's that green tractor that the father-in-law gave me.
As in hard labour, manual labour.
Hard labour. It's just uncomfortable. Put myself in uncomfortable positions. And that tractor seems to do it for me, because it's every time I only drive it probably twice a year, and I'm glad to park it up. But at the same token, it's I don't think I'll ever replace it, because it does something for me. I guess at the end of the day,
works.
it just takes the mind away from all the issues and creates a new issue for me. But at the end of the day, when I look back, of the work I've done with that machine, and the state of that machine, it's pretty horrid sort of tractor, but it gets the job done and does it well. And and that's no different than the pioneers when they first come to Australia. Farming back in those days would have been no different. It would have been torture 24/7, 7 days a week for those guys establishing these farms and properties over here.
Yep. Would you say that, you are feeding or checking your cattle pretty much on a daily basis when you're home, aren't you?
Yeah, I do.
Is that a sort of form of self-care or therapy for you?
Yeah, the farm is, I guess if you want to put it that way, the farm is that self-care for me. It is the thing, I'll, be at this computer for many hours, but, I do have the luxury of going in and going for a drive around and checking on the cows, and, we're calving at the moment. So it's always, I love that time of year. We've just invested in some, red Brahmins and ultra black bulls. And so for me, it's pretty exciting times, because raising cattle is sort of a new adventure for me. But, at the same token, it's, I'm learning, I'm enjoying it, and it's sort of healthy living. Some days I've got to go fix fences, or, like the last recent rain, I've got a bunch of bloody floodgates and that to go fix. So, it does make me get out and do stuff, but I enjoy doing it.
Yep. And self-care takes all different shapes and forms for us. We're all different, so there's different things that work for us. On to some more reflective questions. So we all know the usual question of what would you say to your 20-year-old self if you could see them now, but I'm actually going to flip that. And what would your 20-year-old self be saying to you right now if they could see where you are and what you're doing and how far you've come?
My 20-year-old self, that was my party time. So it was sort of...
So they'd be very surprised about where you're at.
Looking at me, going, geez, what the hell are you doing? You got they'd probably say you don't have a life no more. But see, that was my young years. Like I had friends that went to university, straight out of school, and they did that, and they travelled later in life. Well, I sort of turned that around. I travelled in that early part of life, and I'm sort of, committed on the back end of my life. But I really do want to go back travelling again. So I guess that 20-year-old looking at me would be sort of happy with where I'm at, because he knows the goals. I do live by gospel with goals. I have my book that I have them in. There's a couple there that I haven't ticked off that I wrote many years ago, and they're probably outdated and won't happen. But, if you write those goals down and you think about, life in general. It's not just about having one lot of goals, and that's the one thing that I've learnt with sports people over the years is it's about having your personal goals, your financial goals, your family goals, health, and then once you get all those goals, that just leads to that happiness sort of thing, because I mean
that's success.
Well, that is success. For me, is I always you think about success, and it is about being happy. But what does it take to get happy? And it takes achievement and accomplishment, and it can be financial, or it can be whether it's building a house with your own hands or whatever. It's seeing something from start to finish and actually completing it. And then
Can it be only financial though?
No,
for you, no,
No, definitely not. I mean, financially for me, I'm not too concerned about it. It's the lifestyle and the way of life, and being in a good mindset all the time. I don't really want to. I mean, we all worry about money. Just I've got three kids.
We've all got bills to pay. We've all got commitments. We've all got staff to.
I started my life broke, and I might end up at the end of my life broke or whatever, but I'm going to live it to the full. But it's we all go through that stage where you have kids. Well, you're broke. As soon as you have a kid, you're broke for the time they move out. But like even though you don't. But that's what we're here for. We're here to because we're the role model to them, and you've got to sort of bring them up and teach them everything going forward. And I think that's probably the biggest struggle these last few years, is because I keep going back to COVID because I really feel there was a big change. We were all reprogrammed. We all started consuming online data and purchasing online, and I mean, it all comes with different effects. I mean, it affects you go to Uber and you get your coffee or whatever it may be, but you lose the social thing of actually going to the cafe.
Yeah,
and
that
then
connection.
Supporting a local business and stuff like that, and buying online. Well, it's money ain't coming to stay in the local community, and that's what I like about the bush and the local communities out there. They still understand the importance of supporting local, shopping local, the social
and having that face-to-face engagement and connection.
And it's very, because you go to Sydney. I mean, look, I love Sydney, but I mean, take it or leave it as far as I'm concerned. But I mean, it's a great experience. But you see one guy today, and you won't ever see him again. And I mean, although I do lie, many years ago I jumped in a cab, and there was an Italian guy driving, and he looked at me and he goes, and he kept on looking at me. And I was like, "Oh, what's up?" And he goes, "Elder Reed." I said, "That's my grandma." He goes, "Yeah, you look like her." I said, "How do you know her?" And he said, "I used to cut cane up there in the Burdekin many, many years ago. She used to be the barmaid at my uncle's pub at the same time." Anyway, so I shared a salami sandwich with him. It was a pretty personal. And I thought I'd never see this guy again. A couple of years later, I went to an advertising agency, and I walked out the door and I waved a cab down, jumped in, looked over, it was the sand guy. So that's the only time I've ever sort of really been to Sydney and seen the same guy, or same taxi driver twice anyway.
Yeah.
With it all. But it was just, and I think it's, I don't know where I was going on that, but I mean, that was sort of a moment that, the difference of being in the country and being in the city. The city you go for any experience, but it's, like I love going to Winton, just the locals there, the shop. You can go next year, the same person's at the cafe shop, or, at the local pub, and, you can ask them what's been going on in the last 12 months, and you strike friendships up, and, and I think that's been my balance, is sort of when I do, because I do a lot in the city, but I do like to get to the bush as much as possible.
And I can absolutely agree with you there. That's my favourite part, is getting out to the bush with the clients. What would your 20-year-old self be most surprised about?
My 20-year-old, that I got kids, and 3 of them.
Most proud of?
What my 20 self be most proud of? That I think I've done a good job with those kids. I mean, they're still a challenge, don't get me wrong, but we ain't giving up on them, and they experience a new life that I hadn't experienced. So, like, it doesn't matter what I did, it because it's really not in play for them in their future. Because I mean, things have just changed so much. I think I was one of the first grades that went through school where we had the Commodore 64 computer.
Yeah, okay.
That was great. that was until they used it to set up our prom dates, for graduation. And I got the raw end of the stick on that one with the date that it hit me up with. But it's computers are good, and they created a purpose in life, and they do create things easier. But I do sometimes feel like these smartphones and that make us dumber. Yeah. And that's what my kids is. I really want them to sort of, pick up and travel. Go experience different cultures and stuff like that. Don't forget that sort of stuff, because I think that does help determine the person.
Absolutely. Yep. 2 more questions before we finish, and I'll let you get back to more important work, Glenn. What does the bush need more of?
The bush needs more people experiencing it. Yes. And I think it's highly important that, look, I know that, it's tourism and there's mining in the bush and everything like that, but I sometimes feel mining's starting to, people are relying on that
encroach on the fabric of our regional communities or towns.
Yeah, and I think it was, again, I just had a lot of people, from the city. The first thing they could do when they could get going was get out there, and they loved it, and I think, I know a few people that have actually, from Sydney that went out there and loved it that much, they started up businesses in these communities. And that's the thing is, I think for me was, like I said, the turning point for me was jumping in that car and driving from, being in Sydney to being in Port Hedland to being in Broome and Fitzroy Crossing to, going across, just going and experience all those different locations. They're different cultures. They're all different, I guess, at the end of the day. And they all got, there's some beautiful country to be seen and some really nice people to engage and meet as well.
Absolutely. Best people in the world in the bush towns.
Trustworthy.
Definitely. What does Glenn need more of in 2025?
Fishing. More fishing.
What needs to happen differently for you to get more fishing in 2025?
Nothing really. I've practically got it planned for the first time. So I've jumped in ahead and booked last year I was fortunate enough to get taken on a fishing trip up around Arakoon near Weipa, and it was probably one of the best experiences I had. Just with, there was only like 7 of us on the boat, but there were 7 really good people. Some of them very wealthy. There was one there that was sort of had cancer and was sort of last stages of life, and it was just people that we were all different, but we were all honest and had the best afternoons and dinners together and drinking red wine and listening to stories. And I made a thing of it that I went there. I wasn't going to talk about PBR because that was my 4 days of being away. But then
at work, yep.
Yeah, but it just happened to be that one of the fishing guides was a young kid that was a cousin of one of our bull riders. And we just got talking and come out. And anyway, before they knew it, they sort of knew that I'd worked for PBR, and that's when all the questions started. So, they wanted to know about the bulls and they wanted to know about the industry and, the business aspect of it all. And, but, I was more important on trying to find out more about this coffee mogul that was on the boat. And, there was another guy thing. I mean, I really just loved listening to their stories. I keep telling mine a lot, and it's, but other people are interested, and I like that. And I think it's, you can learn a lot just from sitting and listening. You don't even have to be speaking. I prefer rather to be the listener than the speaker.
You're always learning when you're listening, aren't you?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that'll take and learn plenty from today and what you've shared. And I thank you for being so open and sharing your journey along the way and making the time to talk with us at Built in the Bush.
No
Thanks
problem.
very much.
Thanks for having me. You're welcome.